Fox News alert President Trump and Republicans on the verge of a major victory. The Senate passing the GOP's tax reform bill last night, and very soon the House should be voting on minor revisions to the final version. The last steps before the bill goes to the president's desk to be signed into law. This is Outnumbered. I'm Sandra Smith, and here today is Harris Faulkner, the editor of townhall.com, Katie Pavlich, Democratic strategist and Fox News contributor Jessica Tarlov is here. And today on the couch we have Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz, retired from the U.S. Army. He is a former Green Beret commander and was counterterrorism advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney. And he is outnumbered, and I say that with all due respect, sir. Good to have you.
No one's shooting at me. I'm good. And,
are you sure about that?
Day,
because there's 4 women here, so
only
with words of power.
Every day that we're born in this country, I'm one lucky guy.
Amen. Amen to that.
Beautifully said.
Yeah,
all right.
Sure.
Well, Merry Christmas to everybody.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
We will keep with that theme. Meanwhile, Republicans are celebrating a major legislative win on tax reform. The House about to vote again, this time on a revised version of the bill today. The Senate already passing the measure late last night so they can send it to President Trump to sign into law.
I was very excited. It was a very emotional time because I used to be, Jack Kemp was my mentor, and I've been working on this issue pretty much my adult life because I just feel so passionately that this is going to help get people from welfare to work. It's going to get people higher wages, better jobs. It's going to put the American economy in the lead in the global economy again. So I feel very passionate about it.
A large share of the credit goes to every single member of this conference who voted for the bill.
This is a historic night. The Democrats have said that the American people will remember this night. I hope they do.
My view of this, if we can't sell this to the American people, we ought to go into another line of work.
No Democrat voted for the bill, and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has this warning for Republicans.
The Republican tax bill is like pouring gasoline on a raging fire, easing burdens on those who already have so much, while punishing or ignoring those who have too little, is a profoundly unpopular idea. My Republican colleagues ignore the warnings of the American people at their own peril. Vote no. Otherwise, I believe the entire Republican Party and each of you will come to rue this day.
And you can bet the president will be talking about taxes the very term that we pull away from now to go live to the White House inside the cabinet room. The president on taxes, the potential shutdown of the government if they can't reach a deal, and more. Let's watch.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate everybody being here, cabinet meeting. And this looks like it will probably be our last cabinet meeting until the new year, but who knows? You never know what happens with cabinet meetings. We've had some really great and productive ones, and this will be one of celebration because of what took place last night. We had a historic victory for the American people. It'll go through final passage today in the House. Then the congressmen and women and the Senate will be coming over, the Republican Senate. Unfortunately, the Democrats don't like to see tax cutting. They like to see tax increases, and they like to complain. But they don't get it done, unfortunately, but they complain a lot. So we're going to have the Republican senators come over. We're going to have the Republican members of the House come over. We're going to have a news conference. And people are starting to see how great this historic victory was. The passage of the massive tax cuts and reform. It's a lot of reform in there, but the tax cuts supersede. And I said very specifically, use the word tax cuts. For 34 years, they've been trying to do this, and they haven't, and they use the word reform. Well, there is reform, but I said we're going to be talking about tax cuts. The heart of our bill is a tremendous amount of relief for the middle class, including a doubling of the child tax credit and a nearly doubling of the standard deduction. That's going to be tremendous for people. They're going to start seeing the results in February. This bill means more take-home pay. It will be an incredible Christmas gift for hardworking Americans. I said I wanted to have it done before Christmas. We got it done. I want to thank all of the leaders. I want to thank Mitch McConnell. I want to thank Paul Ryan and so many other people. And we'll go through the official ceremony in a little while when they come over to the White House. But we have a tremendous amount of talent in the House, a tremendous amount of talent in the Senate, I can tell you that, and they love this country. The bill also includes a new family tax credit for dependents. It makes the vast majority of family farms and small businesses exempt from the estate tax. The estate tax was killing the farmers. They were forced to sell farms at bargain basement prices. They don't have to do that anymore. And it brings overseas corporate profits back to the United States. Our plan also lowers the tax on American business from 35% all the way down to 21%. That's probably the biggest factor in this plan. We become competitive all over the world. Our companies won't be leaving our country any longer because our tax burden is so high, because now we're down toward the lower end of the spectrum as opposed to being the highest. We were the highest. And it's really, above all else, it's a jobs bill, because these corporations that are already coming into the country, but they're going to start pouring into the country, it's about jobs, and they're going to build some really great companies and a lot of jobs. We've already created over 2 million jobs since the election. The stock market, as you see, it's at an all-time high yet again. I think that's 86 times since I got elected. 86 times we're at an all-time high. Unemployment is at a 17-year low. We've liberated the American economy from Washington overreach, cutting 22 regulations for every one new regulation, the most in history by far. We've cut hundreds and hundreds of regulations, allowing people to have their businesses, work their businesses, and hire people. And we still have plenty of regulation. Don't worry, we have plenty of regulation. Regulation's not the worst thing, but over-regulation was stifling in our country. You couldn't do anything. We've unleashed U.S. military might on ISIS, and today the coalition to defeat ISIS has recaptured nearly 100% of the territory once held by the terrorists in Iraq and Syria. We're close to 100%. We'll be finished pretty soon with the ISIS situation in those two countries, and we're making it very difficult for them to come here, believe me. We're fighting that very hard, Homeland Security and our great military. We're restoring immigration enforcement at levels that our country has never seen before, and taking the fight to the criminal gangs like MS-13, where we're decimating those animals. They're animals. What they do is horrible, horrible. And we're making the immigration system work for Americans, but we're cleaning out towns of those MS-13 gangsters. That's why we're calling on Congress to fund the border wall, which we're getting very close to. We're working on that. We have a great wall. We put up, as you know, 6 different varieties of wall. We want to be able to see through. We have a lot of help from the Border Patrol and from the ICE agents. We're getting their input on the wall because who knows better than them? But we want vision. We want to be able to see through who's on the other side of the wall. And we have some wonderful prototypes that have been put up. And I may be going there very shortly to look at them in their final form. And we'll be building the wall, and we'll be doing lots of other things. We will, very importantly, be funding and closing the loopholes that undermine our enforcement, and we will get rid of chain migration and the visa lottery program. We have a lottery program where we take in a lottery people from other countries. In some places, we are bringing in some very bad people. And through chain migration and through the lottery, the man that ran over people on the West Side Highway in Manhattan a month ago, 2 months ago, he came in through the visa lottery. We don't want this group of people anymore. People met him in the neighborhood. They all said he was horrible, nasty, mean, wouldn't talk to people. They could see it coming. They could actually see it coming. When they went back to his area where he lived, they could see it coming. They said, what's he doing here? Well, when we take people in the lottery, they're not putting their best people in the lottery. It's common sense. They're not saying, oh, let's take our best people and let's put them into the lottery so that we can send them over to the United States. No, they put their worst people into the lottery. And that's what we get in many cases. So that's not going to be happening anymore. We're going to end it. So we're ending the lottery. We're ending the chain migration, where in his case, they say he might have had up to 24 people come in with him indirectly. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandfathers, grandmothers. And they come in because one guy gets in, then you bring the whole family. And not a lot of jobs there either. I want to tell you, not a lot of working jobs. We're rebuilding our nation, we're rebuilding our confidence, and we're standing in the world as a different country. We're being respected again. Today, the entire world can see that America is coming back, and America is coming back rapidly and strongly. They see that with what's going on economically. This is even before the tax cuts have been approved. And I have to say that a lot of people thought the tax cuts have been approved. I heard a couple of our folks, Steve and Gary and a few others this morning, and they're thinking that the market hasn't fully digested what they've got here. I don't think the market's even begun to realize how good these are, like, for instance, full expensing and other things. We have things in there that is so incredible. One of the great things is bringing back perhaps $4 trillion back into our country. $4 trillion of money that we couldn't get back because of our tax code and because of regulation. We were unable. That money now can flow back into our country and produce jobs and go into our companies where they want to spend it. They want to spend the money here. They weren't allowed to. Americans are filled with excitement for the future, optimism like they haven't seen. You've seen all the charts, and enthusiasm for the incredible possibilities that lie ahead for our country. At this wonderful time, it's a blessed season. We have a blessed country. We're renewing our bonds of loyalty to each other and to this nation. This nation is a nation with tremendous spirit again. You see that. Housing confidence is the highest it's been in many years, just came out. Manufacturing, the highest level of confidence they've had since they started doing it many years ago. And business, it has the highest level of confidence. So we're doing a lot of things. So we'll be meeting again. The cabinet will be meeting again shortly. But we have done a job like no administration has done. We get the final passage, and we are waiting for that final passage. As you know, we do have to go through one more vote in the House, and that's being done virtually as we speak. So when that's done, you add all of that to what we've done in terms of regulatory, in terms of military. As you know, we're going $700 billion for military. We're rebuilding our military. We cannot have a weak military in this time and age. So we're rebuilding our military. But when you add it all up together, and then you add two things, the individual mandate is being repealed. When the individual mandate is being repealed, that means Obamacare is being repealed because they get their money from the individual mandate. So the individual mandate is being repealed. So in this bill, not only do we have massive tax cuts and tax reform, we have essentially repealed Obamacare, and we'll come up with something that will be much better, whether it's block grants or whether it's taking what we have and doing something terrific. But Obamacare has been repealed in this bill. We didn't want to bring it up. I told people specifically, be quiet with the fake news media because I don't want them talking too much about it, because I didn't know how people would. But now that it's approved, I can say the individual mandate on health care, where you had to pay not to have insurance. Okay, think of that one. You pay not to have insurance. The individual mandate has been repealed. The other one is ANWR. So a friend of mine who was in the oil business said, I can't believe it, ANWR. They've been trying to get it for 40 years. 40 years, and I didn't know that. We have ANWR. We're going to start drilling in ANWR, one of the largest oil reserves in the world that for 40 years this country was unable to touch. That by itself would be a massive bill. It'll be one of our biggest oil reserves. It's one of the biggest in the world. Puts us at a level that we're not even at now, and we're doing very well in terms of, as you know, energy. But ANWR by itself would be a big bill. But that's when it hit me, when he said, you know, they've been trying to get that, the Bushes, everybody, all the way back to Reagan. Reagan tried to get it. Bush tried to get it. Everybody tried to get it. They couldn't get it passed. That just happens to be here. And we did that at the request of the two great senators from the state of Alaska, which is a very special place. But I will tell you, ANWR is a big, big deal. It's not ever mentioned by the press, and that was fine until now. Now you can mention it. So we're going to have tremendous energy coming out of that part of the world. and people have wanted to do it for 40 years. So with that, I'm going to ask Ben Carson, and you can stay if you want it, because you need the prayer more than I do, I think. You may be the only ones. Maybe a good, solid prayer, and they'll be honest, Ben. Is that possible? So, Ben, we'll ask you to say grace. Thank you.
Our kind Father in heaven, we're so thankful for the opportunities and the freedom that you've granted us in this country. We thank you for a president and for cabinet members who are courageous, who are willing to face the winds of controversy in order to provide a better future for those who come behind us. We're thankful for the unity in Congress that has presented an opportunity for our economy to expand so that we can fight the corrosive debt that has been destroying our future. And we hope that that unity will spread even beyond party lines so that people recognize that we have a nation that is worth saving, and recognize that nations divided against themselves cannot stand. In this time of discord, distrust, and dishonesty, we ask that you would give us a spirit of gratitude, compassion, and common sense, and give us the wisdom to be able to guide this great nation. In the future, we ask in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Ben. Beautiful. Thank you very much. Mike, would you like to say a few words?
Well, I appreciate it, Mr. President. As I told you last night, shortly after the Senate vote, I know I speak on behalf of the entire cabinet and of millions of Americans when I say congratulations and thank you. Thank you for seeing through the course of this year an agenda that truly is restoring this country. You described it very well, Mr. President. From the outset of this administration, we've been rebuilding our military, putting the safety and security of the American people first. You've restored American credibility on the world stage. We're standing with our allies. We're standing up to our enemies. But you promised economic renewal at home. You said we could make this economy great again. And you promised to roll back regulations. And you signed more bills rolling back federal red tape than any president in American history. You've unleashed American energy. You've spurred an optimism in this country that's setting records. But you promised the American people in that campaign a year ago that you would deliver historic tax cuts. And it would be a middle-class miracle. And in just a short period of time, that promise will be fulfilled. And I'm deeply humbled as your vice president to be able to be here because of your leadership, Mr. President, and because of the strong support of the leadership in the Congress of the United States. You're delivering on that middle-class miracle. You've actually got the Congress to do, as you said, what they couldn't do with Anwar for 40 years. You've got the Congress to do with tax cuts for working families and American businesses what they haven't been able to do for 31 years. And you got Congress to do what they couldn't do for 7 years in repealing the individual mandate in Obamacare. I know you would have me also acknowledge people around this table, Mr. President. I want to thank the leaders in Congress once again for their partnership in this. I want to thank your outstanding team, your Secretary of the Treasury, Stephen Mnuchin, for Gary Cohn, for Ivanka Trump, for your great legislative team, all the members of this cabinet who partnered to drive your vision forward over the past 6 months after you laid out that vision for tax reform. But mostly, Mr. President, I'll end where I began and just tell you, I want to thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank you for speaking on behalf of and fighting every day for the forgotten men and women of America. Because of your determination, because of your leadership, the forgotten men and women of America are forgotten no more, and we are making America great again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. God bless you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Well, I also want to thank all of the members of the cabinet, and I think we have a fantastic team. And next year, we're going to go on to really some amazing things. We're going to We're making ourselves very strong again, right, General? We are, sir. Strong. He was not so happy that first week when I met him. He was saying it's really depleted. Well, we're building it up rapidly, and we'll be at a level like never before. But the members of the cabinet, you've been outstanding. I like the message that Nikki sent yesterday at the United Nations for all of these nations that take our money and then they vote against us at the Security Council, or they vote against us potentially at the Assembly. They take hundreds of millions of dollars and even billions of dollars, and then they vote against us. Well, we're watching those votes. Let them vote against us. We'll save a lot. We don't care. But this isn't like it used to be, where they could vote against you and then you pay them hundreds of millions of dollars and nobody knows what they're doing. So, Nikki, that was the right message that you and I agreed to be sent yesterday, and I've had a lot of good comment on it, believe me. People are tired of the United States. The people that live here are great citizens that love this country. They're tired of this country being taken advantage of, and we're not going to be taken advantage of any longer. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. President, how will the tax plan cost you a fortune? How will the tax plan cost you a fortune, Mr. President?
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
The president in the cabinet room with what he said is likely his final meeting with his cabinet, but he says you never know, things can happen. But you saw him there in the last few words talking foreign policy, and you saw him kind of look off over his right shoulder past Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, whom we believe was seated at the end of the table, was Ambassador Nikki Haley, with a cabinet position, thanking her by simply saying, Nikki, you and I made the right decision that we talked about yesterday with regard to the UN vote now on the president's decision about Israel, and recognizing Jerusalem as its official capital, and moving eventually, it'll take 3 or 4 years, eventually our U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, the significance of that. On the couch today, we have Colonel Michael Waltz, and I want to get your thoughts just on that particular portion, because that's more of America First, which has been his message this week.
Well, and I was able to get a briefing from General McMaster on the national security strategy. And the other point that he was making there, aside from making Jerusalem the capital, was yesterday Ambassador Haley put Iran on notice again in terms of their support for the Houthi rebels, the launches that they're making for rockets into Saudi Arabia, and all of the other nefarious activity that's going on.
All right. I wanted to start there because that's where he ended. But obviously, if I draw your attention to the small box on the lower corner right of your screen, that is the House. They have to do a bit of a revote because they broke some rules in the Senate with some language. So now they're going to revote on the tax bill. No one is worried that this thing won't pass for a second time in the House, but they have to re-debate, as we saw them do yesterday before they voted. And the minute that this wraps up, then we'll see the revote. And the president talked about having people over to the White House, to the People's House, to celebrate this a little bit later. And I caught him, Katie, maybe firming up some talking points as the GOP now has to sell this tax bill to the masses.
Right. You had Press Secretary Sarah Sanders today tweeting out that the Christmas present has almost been delivered to the American people in terms of tax reform. President Trump, during his remarks, talked about the repeal of the estate tax, how it affects farmers. He talked about how the tax bill will go into place and start actually helping people in February, because there will be a little bit of a period where things have to be implemented and put through before people actually start seeing it in their paychecks. And he talked about the Obamacare mandate and actually specifically said, now that the Obamacare mandate has been repealed, that means that Obamacare has been repealed. And so Republicans are not only going to be talking about tax reform in the next couple of months, they're also going to be talking about Obamacare as well, and that will be coming up as a topic, I'm sure, with Democrats.
You know, at year's end, Jessica, and the president's right to say that when he's talking about the critics of this bill, saying that we'll truly let this speak for itself, looking at the results of what we see happen in the economy, the growth that happens as a result of this bill. But already we have started to hear some major U.S. corporations come out and say, they're excited about this. They're raising expectations as far as earnings. They say their hiring is going to go up in the new year. The excitement is out there, and it's not just political. You're hearing that from U.S. businesses.
Some of them, and then there are some obviously on the other side. Mike Bloomberg made comments where he said it's complete fantasy land to think that this is going to trickle down to those and the wages will grow up from it. But yes, you are hearing it. You can't deny the optimism about the economy. You can't deny the Dow. And that's what President Trump said he was coming in to do. And that's what he has done. So this certainly gives the Republicans a boost going into 2018 that they can say that this got done. And I agree, if people see even a little bump in their paychecks, that's going to be exciting. But we do know that the long-term look at this bill is not the same as what's going to happen in the next year. And Democrats and a lot of Republicans who don't even like this bill because there are parts of it they don't enjoy. We've talked about this before, the defunding of the CHIP program, which obviously needs to come back. And what this does, the cuts for the very wealthy, I think 83% of the gains are going to go to the top 1% in the end. And I know they're the biggest taxpayers, but those are things Dems will continue to run on.
So I want to get the Colonel back in here because, you know, some of the criticism for Republicans across this whole landscape of getting tax reform passed was that they called it that. You heard the president say, I tried to tell them not to call it tax reform. It's tax cuts. I said, use those words.
Well, you know, I think it's worth remembering the title of the legislation is the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. You know, this is going to make American corporations competitive again around the world. It's also worth remembering, let's look at some of the corporate tax rates. China 25%, UK 19%, Ireland 12%. We are now going to be competitive, and I think in 2018 when people are around their kitchen tables saying, yes, I got a tax cut, but gee, my relatives who are partially employed or unemployed now have jobs, I think that's going to make a huge difference. And the pass-through taxes, I can tell you, the pass-through piece for LLCs and small business owners, I'm a small business owner, I'm excited, and I'm going to be hiring folks next year.
It's really interesting. Newt Gingrich earlier this morning was tying this into the national security speech that the president gave this week as well, saying that the two are not disconnected.
Economic security is national security.
Right.
Yeah.
If you read the national security strategy that the White House put out earlier this week, they specifically discuss economic stability domestically is essential to fighting foreign adversaries, whether it's overseas in the battlefield or whether it's in the cyber warfare arena. And so that is a definite solidified part of this administration's national security strategy.
Well, which it has been a plank of the national security strategy for decades. The president's emphasized that we know how. Yes, obviously this president is.
Well, but this
more
president today, though, Jessica pointed this out, and he said, I didn't want them talking about it until this thing passed in detail. But he said, Anwar is a big deal. And that ties into that whole sort of independence, if you will, as you have a more global conversation about energy independence.
Well, like we were talking about, I mean, you know, we are going to now eclipse Saudi Arabia as an exporter. That changes the dynamic in the Middle East.
Yeah. Wow. Exciting words today as we watch the screen. They are debating yet again the House floor. They are debating yet again the final version of the tax bill. There were some snafus that they have to fix, and they're going to vote again. Meantime, Republican Senator Susan Collins says reports that she got duped in her decision to vote for tax reform are sexist. Whether she's right, or is it wrong for her to play the gender card on this? Stay close.
All right, well, the House is right now debating the final version of this tax bill. As you know, it already passed in the House and then went on to the Senate. They passed in the Senate, but there was some problems there. So there's now a vote again in the House today. We're expecting that to begin at any moment. When that happens, we will let you know. All right, well, one of the key Republican votes on the tax reform bill was Senator Susan Collins, the main Republican throwing her support behind the bill after getting some key concessions. But many in the media ran with the narrative that she was being tricked.
I would keep a very close eye on Susan Collins, who is under tremendous pressure. Remember, she was sold a bill of goods, some of us thought, by Mitch McConnell in promising these two pieces of legislation that were supposed to ameliorate the effects of the repeal of the individual mandate.
It really is an open question as to whether or not Republicans are planning on giving her what they promised her in exchange for her vote.
Here's the question. Is she getting played?
All right, so Collins hit back, telling reporters, quote, I believe that the coverage has been unbelievably sexist, and I cannot believe that the press would have treated another senator with 20 years of experience as they have treated me. They've ignored everything that I've gotten and written story after story about how I'm duped. How am I duped when all your amendments get accepted?
Katie, I'm going to you.
Yeah, I mean, Susan Collins was a wild card there for a while. They weren't sure if this was going to pass in the Senate because of the opposition that she had, including to President Trump's desire to have the corporate tax rate lowered to the number that he wanted. So this idea that she didn't know what was in it before she passed it, especially when she was offering amendments, as she mentioned, just doesn't really make sense. And why the media, especially the news anchors at those other networks, would take that line is
She's
interesting.
pulling the gender card. Do you agree with that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't like to pull the gender card much. I don't know if they would be. They might be saying this about someone else who got duped if they thought that they were going to vote.
They didn't
for
say
the
about
bill,
Bob
but
Corker.
That's
Corker
true.
over the weekend
So
was saying, "Oh, I don't know how that language got in there that seemed to enrich him."
Sounds like he really did get duped then, right?
No. Yeah. So I mean, I wouldn't play the gender card either. I would just play the facts card. I mean,
You know, people
She feels
want
that way,
their
fine.
people want their representatives to get stuff done. Period. And the media can't have it both ways. You can't criticize members of Congress for being in their ideological pillboxes and throwing grenades and getting nothing done, but then criticize them for compromising when they need to get legislation passed. So, I mean, we have to get it past this kind of compromise is a dirty word. She got a lot of what she wanted. She gave on some things, and now we have a fantastic tax bill.
What about you, Jessica?
Well, we all know I'm a big fan of the gender card, but I actually don't think that's what was going on here, because Jeff Flake said that he was getting DACA protection, which ended up not being true. They said, actually, you're going to get to just sit at the table and talk about it, and was discussed in exactly the same way.
You might call that
Jeff Flake
a
was
dupe.
duped, right? And Susan Collins, I think more than just she was duped about what happened right there, because she did get her amendments. She's very clear about that. Yeah. Democrats look to Susan Collins as a hero because of what she did during the health care debates, that she ended up killing that bill. So the fact that she then signed something or voted for something that took away the individual mandate, I think is where the frustration is, more than they think that because she's a woman, she got duped and they took advantage of her for that. So I don't actually see this one as a sexist trope if we want to revisit issues where I think women are spoken to and spoken about differently than men. There are many. This one I don't see.
So you're going to hold on to that gender card for now?
Yeah, I'll save it for
No,
later.
I'm just saying, I mean, look at what she got. She got deductions for large medical expenses. She got, the cap for the SALT taxes. She got tax exemptions for certain types of hospitals. I mean, she got a lot of what she needed in there. And I just don't, I
So
think
in the mainstream media, you have a conservative who is doing things that turn out to be good, and she doesn't get credit.
Right. Well,
that's not gender.
Well, and I think part of it was there was
a double
some
standard between
there was some criticism
Right?
that she didn't cry. While hearing from a DACA, that was the original that she didn't cry while hearing from not a DACA, but someone who was losing their Obamacare. And
so she
and
didn't
that
have
was
the matching
yeah,
emotion.
Exactly.
That's
She
like
didn't have a
telling
matching
women, well, you
emotion.
don't
That's
smile
ridiculous.
enough.
Right.
And
See, in that case,
she
wasn't empathetic enough in that
Right, that
situation.
she wasn't
and that would,
empathetic
I guess,
as a woman.
can be
That's
considered
All right, she got a lot done.
I want to get in here,
pull the card out.
go to Capitol Hill for a second. As you can see, voting has begun. This is the amended bill. It came back from the Senate. The House is now re-voting on that. It is expected to pass. When it does, we'll let you know. But obviously after this, it goes to the president's desk to be signed. So we're watching the vote. It's happening right now. We'll let you know when it concludes. Michael Waltz.
I'm excited. Again, small business owner. I'm ready to hire.
Yeah.
I have my CFO has built in the lower tax rate for both corporation and LLC, and we've figured out how many jobs that we're going to create next
That is
year.
such a key point, because I think
That's
the
right.
entire economy is doing that as well.
That's right.
So you heard the president say today, and again, I mean, Republicans are kind of getting chided. It's kind of like throwing a little shade, but light shade, I guess. Let me give you guys the better talking points on this in terms of Americans and where they can feel this. Like, you're excited about this, but the president drove home, I think, better than the GOP as a whole did, this idea that farms were really getting hit. Well, farm owners were having to sell for a lot less than their property was worth because of that estate tax. Well, that actually takes some of the venom out of the hands of Democrats who were throwing just all sorts of fire about the estate tax and who it benefited. And the president said, no, these were struggling farms, giving the example as you are now of how you'll use this to hire
that's right.
in your own
These
small
are your
business.
electricians, these are your franchise owners, these are your small mom and pop retail shops.
They're also your hedge fund managers, your real estate tycoons.
but not on the pass
but it
piece.
is.
Not on the pass
But on the
piece,
whole
though.
bill, I mean, that's what happened this weekend. Bob Corker says, I
But
woke
the
up and I don't
pass-through
know
is
how.
top to bottom.
Yeah.
It's not upper crust.
I understand
It's top to
that.
bottom
but
of those
the president,
small businesses.
I completely agree with you.
Businesses
The
and farms.
president 100% messages better than the GOP, which is why he managed to
Yeah, but
win
it
this
helps if
presidency.
it's true, right?
Well, but
like if he's
this
just
isn't-
messaging
he's
and it's not
talking
true.
about his tax break, which would be the most
Talking
honest
about
thing
farmers.
to do.
Why does it matter
Small
if he gets a
businesses?
tax break
Because he
and the middle
lies.
class?
Small businesses
Because he
hire north
lies
of
about that. Sarah
67%.
Sanders said that he wouldn't be
But
getting
this is
a
what
break.
I don't
We all
understand
know
about
that
the
he
left.
is.
They're a job engine driver, as you said.
That's right.
67% is that number that we've been
Right.
seeing, kind of edge between 66 and
what I don't
70 over the
understand
last
about
few years
the
for
left is
hiring
if you're
percentage in
giving-
America.
If you're giving a tax break to wealthy people and also giving a tax break to the middle class,
That's
is
what
somehow
Reagan
a bad
did.
thing because you are not only just giving it to the middle class, and we can give one to everyone. This bill doesn't exactly do that. But back to your point about the estate tax, the estate tax is actually just a fancy, nice way to say death tax.
Right.
It's taking your money after you have paid your entire life to the government
That's
after
right.
you die, rather than allowing you to pass it on to your children, whether you're a hedge fund manager or a farmer.
Take
And
it
it
when
shouldn't
you-
matter which one
Bigger
you are.
deal
Take it
when
when you
you're a
save it, take it when you
farmer
earn it,
because
take it when you
They
die.
take it all
A
the
lot
time.
of times those are family businesses, not to say that hedge fund managers don't pass along the family business, but we know farming
Ask
in
the
this country.
Clintons about
to
the
your
family
point-
business
to your
hedge
point,
fund
Jessica,
managers.
you know,
They know all about it.
Every month, everyone is looking at their 401k return, their retirement.
They're looking at it
looking
now.
at it and seeing it go up, up, and up, and that is across the board.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that is two
They're not
thumbs
having
up.
to side eye it anymore.
right.
But
Like,
there are, but we do know that some of these cuts do get phased out over time. I mean,
Sure.
this isn't
So did the Bush
in the
tax
next year.
cuts, and Obama
Absolutely, but
rolled them right
the
in.
argument that's being made, which is that Americans are just going to be across the board better off from this, is not when you look at the 10-year forecasts. We know, obviously, and listen, I'm a Democrat. I don't wake up in cold sweats about the deficit, but we know that there are a lot of Republicans who are concerned about that. Sort of
And that's a
Bob
national
Corkers of the
security issue, too.
Americans
Absolutely.
are concerned about that.
Americans
Yeah, I am
are concerned about
Because
that.
it's our grandkids,
and
grandkids
this adds
will have
1.5
to
trillion.
pay
You know,
it.
we're losing 330 billion from the repeal of the Obamacare individual mandate and revenues. We'll have to make that up somewhere else.
That's
so
right.
I'm thrilled
And you
that
know
you're
what, we're moving,
hiring
but-
more
Yeah, but you know
people,
what?
but-
Can I just
But on the
say
deficit,
it's a little
it's not taking people's
disingenuous, and I've looked at the sunsetting that you're talking about of certain of the
Yeah.
individual tax cuts, right? So it's a little disingenuous to say, well, oh, they're just going to go away. You know, Democrats have an opportunity down the road to vote with Republicans to make sure that we extend those tax cuts.
I imagine
think you
that
might
would
not
be
like
exactly
it
what
because
they
it
did.
means
What
that
happened with
your
the
side's
Bush
going to have to extend the tax cuts.
That's exactly what
Which
we did
is a-
with Bush cuts. That's
Right.
I don't think
Exactly.
there is, listen, there's not a natural reflexive hatred for a tax cut that lives in liberals.
Yes,
I think
there is.
no, there isn't. Well, at least not in this liberal.
I-
Listen, I'm getting a tax
Yeah, I
cut.
disagree
That's
there.
great. But when you have the sunsetting, when you have the breaks, the death tax, maybe not the alternative minimum tax, for instance, that is just going to benefit people like the Trump family. Those are things, when you ran on a platform, a populist platform, that you are going to be making sure that the lower and middle classes are better off. Why did you cut the corporate tax rate so dramatically and not the individual
This is
rate
why,
at the
because
level?
you don't
Because
have
it's a
you do
cut
not
and growth
you do
plan.
not have to keep a corporate tax rate high in order to benefit the middle class. You
I'm
can do
saying, why
both of them
couldn't you
at the
have
same
done
time.
a higher individual cut and lowered the corporate rate? Democrats aren't opposed to cutting the corporate rate, maybe not going down to the level that it was, but that is somewhere where we can agree. Why wasn't the individual rate? Why don't you let people, at the moment that the cut goes into place, actually control that money themselves instead of waiting for a trickle-down miracle?
So just
But
an
that's
update.
back to
I just wanted to jump in and update everybody that the voting is underway in the House right now. They're voting on the Senate bill that went back to the House after it passed yesterday. And we're waiting for this to come in. If you can see the tally there, 98 yays, 91 no's right now. Just to remind everybody, 12 House GOP lawmakers voted against this bill in the original vote. It is largely expected to pass again. Remember, those were Republicans from those high tax states that object to this bill. But right now, it's on its way to passing. Not yet, but it does go to the president's desk after this. And this would be the conclusion of a big week. Michael Waltz.
Huge week. I want to go back to Jessica's point on, and that's a question, and I think a fair question a lot of people are asking. Why did we not just lower the individual tax rates? Why did we lower the corporate as well? And that is, to go back to my original point, why it is a tax cut and Jobs Act. And so, look, that's fine if we all pay lower taxes. I don't want to give the government any more of my own personal money, but the way small businesses and corporations are going to create growth and create jobs is by lowering the rate, making them competitive globally. Secondly, on your point on the deficit, I worry about the deficit too.
Yeah.
In the future, we are going to have to borrow almost every dollar that we spend from the Defense Department. And who are we borrowing from? The majority from the Chinese. That scares me. That concerns me. At the same time, really what is the white elephant in the room that's going to affect our deficit? It's healthcare explosion, the explosion of costs, and entitlement reform.
Which is
and that is the big elephant in the room.
100%. There's a very strong
for the 70% non-discretionary budget.
When you look at all of the old footage of Paul Ryan from when he first got to the House, and it is miraculous. He looks like he's so young when he got there, and he's been wanting this his entire career. And you see a lot of articles that are saying that this is, with the acceptance of the increase in the deficit, this is just a cover for the entitlement reform that the Republicans have wanted. And programs like Social Security and Medicare are programs that are they're not a gift. We paid into them. We are owed that when we get to that age. And I believe that we should be allowed to reject our Social Security benefits and put that back into the pot if we are wealthy enough to take care of ourselves. I think that is the smart. Voluntarily. Why? If I have enough money that I don't need my Social Security, I should be able to
donate that to private companies or private organizations can better do charity work for people who need some help in retirement than the federal government.
But that's because we see that differently. But you shouldn't have to take the money, or it should be something. It should be your choice to put it back into
the point is there's a lot of ways. The point is there's a lot of ways to reform it.
You can write a check to the Treasury Department anytime. So if you're getting a Social Security check you don't need every 2 weeks, you can write a check back to the Treasury Department at any point.
But they're sorry.
No. I just want to make. I don't think a lot of folks realize that 70% of our federal budget is untouchable. It's the non-discretionary portion that's what's ballooning our debt, and that is Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And any lawmaker who steps up to try to fix it, reform it, and make it better just gets pilloried from both sides. And we need some political courage in our leadership
and the
to
spending,
step up
the
and
spending
fix it.
side of this too is a big question, and the White House and Congress, Republicans in Congress, are banking on the economic growth that they claim is going to come out of this. Now they're saying 3%. The president has said as much as 6-7%. We'll see where it flies. But
I want to jump in here and
$4 trillion coming in.
Bring our attention back to what's playing on the left of the screen. Okay. I love listening to you guys, though. I mean, this is great conversation, and I look forward to going into the new year with more of this, because that entitlements are something that there will be a fight over at the beginning of the year, right?
Yeah.
That's that third rail that nobody has wanted to step on. We know Paul Ryan has, and others have said that is a place where they want to go from the beginning of his career, Speaker Ryan, with entitlements. But I just want to draw everybody's attention back to what we're looking at, because the people at home have just tuned in. They're wondering, why in the heck are they re-voting in the House? And it's because they missed a couple things for the Senate side. So they got the Senate version fixed, sent back to the House. They're going to vote on that now. We have no reason to believe that it won't pass a second time. But they did do some debate, to which we all kind of laughed and said, well, y'all debated yesterday. Republicans can take several seats, let the Democrats say what they want, and then and it played out for the most part very quickly. And now, after that short debate, they are voting. And then what's next? The president is holding an event later at the People's House, the White House. And we got to hear a little bit of what I would call some juicier talking points for Republicans to take to the masses from the president today.
For sure. Look, I think, what needs to happen now is Republicans have got to sell this.
Why do they need to sell it if it's so great, though?
Because it's not.
because
Jessica
has
Colonel
easy.
Waltz.
Sorry.
Jessica and folks like her have very easy talking points. That
well, the answer that the Speaker of the House has given to that is that there's been a lot of mistruths about the bill put out by the media, and therefore, when polled, people respond to those mistruths in the media. That's his response to that. But Democrats continue to rail on this, saying that it's gone through too fast, to the point where people really don't even know what's in it. Sound familiar?
Yeah, right.
Interesting that was sort of the narrative when Democrats were trying to push through Obamacare.
Yeah. I think it's easy to say benefit the rich, gonna hurt the poor. If you look at the Reagan tax cuts, they were equally kind of dubious in their popularity until people saw the benefit come through. And like I said, if they're sitting around their kitchen table and they're seeing more money in their pockets, less money to the government, friends and family getting hired, small businesses where they, in their communities that are growing, and month after month after month, their 401k and their retirement plan growing, we're in good shape.
All right, I want to bring our viewers along for the ride here because we're waiting for this re-vote happening in the House right now. We're voting on those changes that were made, the small minor changes that were made to the coming from the Senate. So the re-vote's happening right now. As you can see, the countdown clock there. There's only a couple minutes left in this vote. The bill passed in the House yesterday by 227 to 203. As I mentioned, 12 Republicans voted against that, like the Pete Kings from New York, from those high tax states. The Senate cleared the law in the wee hours of the morning, about 1:45 this morning, by a 51 to 48 vote. No votes, no yeses from Democrats. If this passes, which it is expected to in the next couple of minutes, that means it's off to the president's desk. Exactly when that happens, we do not know, but the president and the Republicans are expected to take a victory lap. As Harris just mentioned at the White House a little bit later today, the president has called this an important day, an historic victory for the American people. As you can see, the countdown clock, just over a minute left. We'll watch this vote, but again, expected to pass, and it passed yesterday in the House, 227 to 203.
Yeah, so you heard the president talk about doubling the child tax credit, more take-home pay, as you mentioned, Colonel Waltz. The individual mandate is being repealed, which means Obamacare is being repealed. I fully expect, Katie, because you and I, we perked up when he said that, for that to have been the talking point that he was looking forward to. He said, I didn't want to talk about it much until this thing passed, but I think we'll hear that more and more. With what he projects to be his final cabinet meeting just moments ago, so you saw that live. It's been a very lively hour of Outnumbered here, a lot going on. So you saw him, though, wrap up talking about foreign policy, talking about the border wall. But just to step back for a second, this is a huge moment in history that we thought that we would have seen in the wee hours of the morning as the Senate was voting, but we knew that the revote was coming in the House. Once this comes, it's done. And then it goes to the president's desk, and you just take a beat here, because you haven't seen this sort of top-down tax bracket cutting since Ronald Reagan. You haven't seen this sort of look at the tax code in general since the 1980s. And so this is more than just what we like to colloquially call the big deal. This is history making in America, and really could set us up for some change moving ahead in an economy that's already cooking.
And it's important to point out that the Republicans are united on this. I mean,
for the most
looking
part.
at massive legislation like this without much drama happening on the House floor right now is important to note.
It really is. It's not only a huge legislative victory historically for the American people, but it is the first big legislative win for the president this year. He's had some battles with Mitch McConnell over the summer. He's been frustrated with the way that Obamacare was brought up for votes and failed.